My mother drained $12,000 from my son's college fund. I found out on a Tuesday morning over a cup of coffee that turned cold while I ran the same number 3 times. The statement came in the regular mail, the way those things always do. Fidelity envelope. Thin paper. The kind of document I'd been signing and filing without reading for almost 2 years, because every piece of paper with Sarah's handwriting on it still felt like a small electric shock, and I had learned early to handle them quickly and get them into the drawer. Mateo was at the other end of the kitchen table, drawing a stegosaurus. He was 8 in 6 days. He had told me, very seriously, that he wanted a stegosaurus cake because the stegosaurus was the dumbest dinosaur in the book his teacher gave him and he felt bad about it. That was my son. He picked the dinosaur nobody wanted because nobody wanted it. He slept with a photograph of his mother in his pillowcase. He put his hand on my knee at breakfast every single morning without knowing he was doing it, and if I had any idea on that Tuesday morning what was about to happen, I would have stopped and put my hand over his and told him something true. I didn't know yet, couldn't have known. The envelope came open, and my brain did the thing it does for a living, which is run the numbers without asking me first. Project manager. That's what it says on my business card. Good with numbers, bad with feelings. The kind of man who measures and estimates and budgets for framers who hate paperwork and who has never in his life stared at a line on a page and felt his stomach drop the way mine dropped that morning. $6,360. That wasn't the balance. That wasn't close to the balance. The last time I had checked the account, which was probably a year ago, probably longer, the balance had been a little over $18,000. Sarah's parents put in 5, I put in 4. The rest was growth and the tiny monthly contribution I'd set up and then forgotten about. The way you set up any promise you make to a dying person and then forget about it because keeping it is the easy part. Money moves on its own. You don't have to think about it. That's the whole point. I ran the number again. 6,360. I heard myself breathe out, and Mateo glanced up from his stegosaurus and said, "Dad, what color was he?" I said, "Green, I think. Or gray. I don't know, mijo. Probably both." He nodded the way he nodded when he was filing something away, and he returned to his drawing, and I got up and walked into the living room with the statement in my hand because I did not want my son to see my face. I sat down on the couch. I pulled up the Fidelity app. I had not opened it in a long time. It made me put in my password twice. I scrolled to the transaction history, and I saw the first one I could see, and then I scrolled up and saw another, and scrolled up and saw another, and I kept scrolling, and the list kept going, and at a certain point I stopped counting and started pressing the tip of my thumb into the side of the phone so hard my thumbnail went white. None of this was a clerical error. I knew it before I called anyone. I knew it the way you know when the foundation on a job is wrong before the inspector opens his mouth. You can feel it through your boots. But I called anyway, because that is what people do. They call the bank and ask the bank to tell them the thing they already know so that they don't have to be the one who said it first. A man named Marcus Webb returned my call 40 minutes later. I was still on the couch. Mateo had finished the stegosaurus and started a second one on the back of the same page, because he always drew two, because he said the first one got lonely. Marcus Webb had a kind voice, careful. I could hear him clicking through screens. "Mr. Reyes, I'm pulling up the account now. Can you confirm the custodian on file?" "Daniel Reyes." "Me." "And the secondary custodian?" I said her name before I was ready to say her name. "Elena Reyes, my mother." There was a pause, a very small one. The kind a person makes when they already know what they're about to say is the thing you don't want to hear. He said, "Sir, I can walk you through the withdrawal history, if that would be helpful." I said, "Please." He listed them out loud, one at a time. Date, amount, authorizing custodian. I had gone back into the kitchen by then because I needed to write them down, and the only piece of paper I could find without opening a drawer was the back of my son's drawing. Flipping the stegosaurus over, I wrote in pencil and tried to keep my hand steady and listened to a stranger in a call center in Jacksonville, Florida, recite the slow disassembly of a promise I had made to my wife when she was dying. December of 2023, $500. February of 2024, $600. April, $800. June, $1,200. By the time he got to the one in November of 2025, which was $2,200 in a single transfer, I had stopped trying to keep my handwriting legible. The pencil was pressing through the paper. I was making lines instead of numbers. I could feel Mateo's eyes on the back of my neck. The last one was 4 days ago, $2,000, the Friday before Easter. Marcus Webb finished reading. He waited. He said, "Mr. Reyes, would you like me to initiate a dispute process? Given that the secondary custodian is a family member, there are some steps we can take, but I want to make sure you have the information before we—" I said, "I'll call you back." I hung up. I sat down in the chair across from my son. I put the drawing face down between us. I could see the pencil numbers through the paper, the way you can see a bruise through thin skin. I looked at my boy's face. He was concentrating on the second stegosaurus. He had given it a flower in its mouth. I should have been thinking about what I was going to do. I was thinking about Sarah. She was in the hospice bed, the one by the window that looked out onto the juniper in the courtyard. It was 2 days before she died. Her hand was in mine and her grip was almost nothing, just a suggestion of pressure, and she looked at me with that terrible clarity you get at the end and she said, "Promise me Mateo goes to college. Promise me nothing touches that fund. Nothing." I said, "I promise." She said, "Say it again." I said, "I promise." That was the whole conversation. I have never told anyone those words left her mouth. Not my mother, not Tia Rosa, not Kev, not a therapist I saw 3 times and stopped. The sentence lived inside me like a small, useful thing I would take out only when I needed to be sure of what I was supposed to be doing. I took it out right there, at the kitchen table, across from my son and his second stegosaurus, and I set it down next to the pencil numbers on the back of the drawing. And I understood that I was going to have to explain, eventually to the 8-year-old in front of me, that the thing I had promised to protect had been taken apart from the inside by the person who taught me how to make promises in the first place. I got up. I walked Mateo to school. We didn't talk on the way. I held his hand at the crosswalk. I kissed the top of his head at the school gate the way I always do. I watched him walk across the blacktop to the 2nd grade door, and I watched the stegosaurus plush on his backpack bounce with every step, and I thought, he has no idea, not yet, and then I turned around and walked back to the truck. I sat in my own driveway with the engine running for 11 minutes. No idea what I was going to say when I got there. Only one thing was clear: one more minute in that truck was going to turn me into someone I didn't want my son to meet. The drawing went on the passenger seat, face down. Through the paper you could see the 14 pencil numbers. My father's death came up first, then Sarah's, then every single thing I believed about the woman who raised me, and sitting in that driveway with the engine running, I understood that I was about to find out which of those things had ever been true. My mother lived 25 minutes away. I put the truck in reverse. The interstate was already thickening into the morning slog by the time I merged on. Taillights pulsed and released, and I matched them, and my hands on the wheel were doing that thing hands do when a man is trying very hard not to feel what his chest is doing. 25 minutes to Aurora. I knew the route by memory. I used to drive it 3 times a week when she was still babysitting Mateo on weekdays, back before she said it was too much for her knees, which I now understood might not have been about her knees. The memories came in no particular order. My father, Raul Reyes, was 47 when his heart stopped in the parking lot of a Safeway in 1997. I was 5. My only clean memory of him is the smell of Old Spice and the way he used to tuck the blanket so tightly under my chin that my feet would pop free at the bottom, and he would say, very seriously, that I was escaping. The day he died, my mother came home from the hospital and walked into the kitchen and took out flour and rolled pie dough on the counter because she did not know what else to do with her hands. I remember sitting on the linoleum, watching her knuckles move, and I remember her saying over and over without looking at me, "Estamos bien, mijo, estamos bien." We weren't, but we were going to be, because she made us be. She picked up a second shift at a courthouse in Denver typing up transcripts. She enrolled in night school bookkeeping at Red Rocks. She bought me a pair of New Balance sneakers at the end of 3rd grade because my old ones had a hole and I had been hiding the hole for a month. She sat at the end of my bed on the night I didn't make varsity and told me that sometimes the world tells you to learn patience and the thing to do is learn patience. She was the reason I knew how to work. She was the reason I knew how to love a woman who was dying. She was the reason I knew how to hold my son's hand at a crosswalk without letting him feel that my own hand was shaking. A kid in a Subaru cut me off at the 6th Avenue merge and I didn't even honk. The second memory came without being invited. It was the last good day Sarah had. The hospice bed, the one by the window, my mother in the chair next to the bed, holding Sarah's right hand in both of hers. Sarah had lost most of her hair by then, and her skin had gone that specific papery gray that means the body is shutting down in a neat and efficient way, and my mother was humming to her, an old lullaby, the one her own mother had hummed to her in a village outside Chihuahua 60 years ago. Sarah had her eyes closed. My mother's thumb was moving in tiny slow circles on the back of Sarah's hand, the way you rub a child's palm to get them to fall asleep, and I stood in the doorway watching the 2 women in my life, one of them about to leave me, the other of them about to be everything I had left, and I thought, at the time, that I was the luckiest broken man in the state of Colorado. I had to pull off at the Colfax exit because my throat had closed up and I needed to breathe before the merge onto Havana. The third memory was smaller and sharper. It was October of last year. I had dropped Mateo off at her house for a Saturday morning while I went to a job site in Lakewood. She opened the door and reached out to take Mateo's hand, and her right hand came forward without the ring on it. 13 years that ring had been on her right hand, her wedding band. She had moved it from her left to her right the week after the funeral, on the theory that a widow's ring belongs on the other side of her heart. For 13 years it sat there, dull gold, thin as a wire. And on that October morning it was gone. I noticed. Of course I noticed. You don't miss something you've been looking at since you were 5 years old. She caught me looking and said, quickly, I took it off to bake, the flour gets under it. Primera said, sure mama. I didn't push. Why would I push? She had raised me alone on 2 paychecks and a night school certificate, and she was allowed to take her wedding ring off to make empanadas on a Saturday if she wanted to. Driving up Havana in the rain light of an April morning with a stegosaurus drawing on the passenger seat and 14 pencil numbers bleeding through the paper, I understood that the ring had not been in a dish on the kitchen counter. It had never been in a dish on the kitchen counter. I had missed it because I had wanted to miss it. I had given my mother every inch of benefit and every mile of doubt because the version of the story where I didn't was a version I couldn't live inside. I pulled up in front of her little brick ranch house on Salida Street at 10:22 in the morning. I sat in her driveway for another 3 minutes. The wind was coming through the juniper in her front yard the way it always did. Her mailbox still had the stick-on letters spelling R and E and Y and E and S, half the paint flaked off from sun. Her curtain in the living room window was the same cream-colored curtain it had been since I was in middle school. Everything was the same. Nothing was the same. Both of those things were true at once, and I sat there trying to figure out how a man walks up a path he has walked up 1,000 times and knocks on a door he has never in his life had to knock on like this. I was rehearsing sentences when the curtain moved. She had been watching. She had seen the truck pull up, and she had seen me sit in it, and she had been standing behind that cream-colored curtain watching her only son not get out of his truck, and I have since wondered 100 times whether she knew in that first glance what I was there for. The front door opened before I could ring the bell. Elena Reyes, 58 years old, 5'2" in her slippers, hair pinned up the way she always pinned it up for work even after she stopped going to work, a small silver cross at her throat, her reading glasses pushed up onto her forehead. She was wearing the same blue cardigan she had been wearing for about 12 years. She was who she had always been, which was my mother, which was the person I would have walked through a burning building for, which was maybe the most dangerous thing a person can look like when they are the one who did it. She said, "Me Ray, you didn't tell me you were coming. I have coffee." Her voice was the same voice, her face was the same face. And somewhere deep in the part of me that had spent 34 years trusting her, something quiet broke into 2 uneven pieces. I said, "Mama." My voice came out smaller than I meant. "I need to come in." She stepped aside. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, the kind of faltering you only catch if you're looking for it, and I was looking for it. Then she recovered. She pulled the door wider. She gestured me into the hall with the slight bow of the head she used to do at parent-teacher nights when she wanted a teacher to take her son seriously. The hall smelled like coffee and Vicks VapoRub and the specific lemon cleaner she had used on floors since before I could reach a doorknob. Through the archway, her kitchen. The same kitchen. The table was the one I did my 8th grade algebra at, and my 9th grade biology at, and my college applications at, and the table I sat at when she gave me my father's watch on my 16th birthday and said he would have wanted me to have it on a day that meant something. The wood was scarred along the edge from a hot pan I had put down without a trivet the summer I was 17. The scar was still there. I had traced it with my thumb 1,000 times. She pulled out a chair for me. She went to the coffee pot. She asked me if I wanted sugar. She asked me if I had eaten. She asked me if the drive had been bad. Her back was to me, and her hands were moving, and I could hear her breathing a little too carefully. I did not sit in the chair she pulled out. I circled the table and set the stegosaurus drawing down in front of her chair. Face up, 14 pencil numbers along the back of the paper, visible through the thin sheet in the morning light from the kitchen window, and a green and gray stegosaurus staring up at the ceiling with a flower in his mouth. She turned from the coffee pot. She saw the paper. She did not look at me. She did not pick the drawing up. She looked at her own hands, small brown hands, knuckles swollen, the pale groove on her right hand ring finger where the gold had been for 13 years, and she did not speak. She had not noticed yet that I had stopped breathing. The clock on the microwave showed 27 minutes past 10. I know because I stared at it for a long time, waiting for my mother to say something. When she finally spoke, she said, "That can't be right, Mireille. That account is for Mateo." "I know," I said. "There has to be a mistake. I would call the bank." "Do you want me to call the bank?" "I can call them." "I already called them, Mama." Her shoulders did a small, specific thing. I have watched her stand at that counter 5,000 times in my life, and I know every shape her body can make. This was a new shape. It was the shape of a woman who had been rehearsing for a conversation for 16 months and had never figured out the first line. "Do you want coffee?" she said. "No." She poured me coffee anyway. She set the cup in front of the chair I had not sat in. She sat down across from the drawing. She did not touch it. She did not turn it over to look at the pencil numbers. She looked at the flower in the stegosaurus's mouth. She took a long, slow breath. She put her hands flat on the table on either side of the drawing, palms down, the way a person places their hands on a table when they are about to confess. "It's complicated," she said. That was the line I would remember later. That was the specific phrase, chosen by a woman who spoke English as a second language, who had been rolling pie dough in a kitchen in Aurora the day her husband died, who had never in her life said a complicated thing in a complicated way because life had not given her the luxury. "It's complicated" was the phrase of a person hiding behind the wallpaper. I pulled out the chair she had offered me. I sat down, not because I wanted to, because my knees were not going to hold me much longer and I refused to be standing when the rest of the story came out of her mouth. "Start with December," I said, 2023. 2 months after Sarah died, $500. Tell me where it went. She looked up at me then. Her eyes had water in them, but the water was not moving yet. Her mouth was doing the thing her mouth did when she was organizing sentences into the order she wanted me to hear them in. I had seen that mouth 1,000 times across parent-teacher conferences and bank counters and emergency room reception desks. It was the mouth of a woman who knew how to manage an outcome. "Daniel," she said, "I want to tell you the whole thing, but you have to let me tell it the way it happened. Tell it however you want. I'm not going anywhere." She told it in pieces. She told it out of order, and she circled around the worst parts, and she used the word borrowed a lot, and every time she used it I watched my own hand twitch on the tabletop because borrowed is a word you use when you intend to give something back, and she had not given any of it back. The short version, the one I assembled later while I was driving away from her house, went like this. After my father died, she had started going to a place. A little storefront off South Havana with video slot machines and fluorescent lights and the smell of microwaved burritos. Not often. Once a month at first, then every other week. She told herself it was the way some women went to bingo and some women went to the movies. It was her time. It stayed small for years, $20 a week, sometimes $40. The kind of money that disappears from a household budget without anybody noticing because she was the only one in the household who looked at the budget. And then Sarah died. She described the week after the funeral like she was describing a room she had walked into by mistake. She said the house felt too big, which is a strange thing to say about a 900-square-foot ranch in Aurora, but I knew what she meant. She said she couldn't sleep. She said she would lie awake and see Sarah's face in the ceiling plaster and hear Mateo crying from the next room. Mateo, who had been sleeping over at her house because I was a man who had not yet figured out how to put my own son to bed without breaking. And she said she thought, some nights, that if she could just get out of the house and put her hands on something that blinked, she would be able to breathe again. So she went. One night. Then another. The first withdrawal from Mateo's account was 2 months after the funeral, $500. She told herself it was a loan. She told herself the casino owed her. She told herself the number next month would be smaller. The number next month was bigger. The number the month after that was bigger. The number last November, the one Marcus Webb had recited to me over the phone, was $2,200, and she told me, looking down at the flower in the stegosaurus's mouth, that she had won $6,000 that night and driven home at 3 in the morning with the cash in a grocery bag and put it in a drawer in her bedroom and promised herself she would deposit it back on Monday morning. Monday morning came, I said. Monday morning came, she said. I waited. I did not ask the question. I was learning, that morning, how much can be understood by a man who waits. I had to pay the water bill, she said, and the car, and the furnace. There had been a lot of other withdrawals from the other account. What other account? Mine. How much? The retirement. All of it? Most of it. We sat in silence for a long time. Her coffee was going cold in front of her. Mine was going cold in front of me. Somewhere in a neighbor's yard a dog was barking in rhythm, 3 barks, pause, 3 barks, and I counted 11 sets before anyone spoke again. I did not ask her the question I had come to ask. I asked her a different one. Where is the ring? Her face did the thing a face does when a trapdoor opens under it. She had been holding her composure all morning by keeping her story inside a small, manageable shape, the gambling, the loan, the plan to pay it back, and the ring was outside that shape, and she had not known I knew the ring was outside that shape. And for the first time in the conversation she looked genuinely, terribly afraid. Daniel. Mama. Where is the ring? I took it off to bake. The flour gets under it. I did not say anything. I did not move. I kept my eyes on her hands. The groove on her right ring finger was pale and thin and exactly as wide as the band that had been there since the week my father died. The silence in the kitchen was the silence of a house where a truth is being weighed. There's a pawn shop on Colfax, she said, almost a whisper. Near Yosemite Street. It was last October. I meant to go back for it. I haven't been back for it. How much did they give you? $460. The number landed in the kitchen like a bird hitting a window. $460. 13 years of a widow's gold on her right hand. Exchanged on a Tuesday afternoon in Aurora for $460 because the machines at the little storefront off South Havana had needed to be fed. I stood up. My hand was on the back of the chair. My knuckles were white. I did not know what I was about to do. And that was the moment the key turned in the front door. Tia Rosa walked into the kitchen humming under her breath, a green chile casserole in one hand and her purse in the other, chattering about the guy at the King's Supers who had charged her twice for the same bag of tortillas. She came around the archway into the kitchen saying, "You won't believe what this boy tried to..." And she saw my face. Then she stopped mid-sentence, exactly the way a person stops when they realize they have walked into the wrong conversation in the wrong room on the wrong day, and the casserole dish in her hand went very still, and she looked from me to my mother and back to me and very slowly said, in the smallest possible voice, "Ay, Dios mío, he found out." Rosa Villanueva, 61 years old, my aunt, my mother's older sister. The woman who had picked me up from middle school every Wednesday for 2 years while my mother was working the second shift. The woman who had taught me how to make pozole by scent alone. The woman whose refrigerator, when I was a kid, always had a magnet on it that said, "La verdad duele pero cura," the truth hurts but it heals, and who had made me translate it for her out loud every time I visited so I would remember it when I was grown. She set the casserole dish down on the counter without looking at it. She put her purse on top of the stove. She pulled out the third chair at the table, the one nobody had been sitting in, and she sat down in it like a woman who had been coming to this meeting for 4 years and finally got the invitation. "Rosa," I said, "what do you know?" She looked at my mother. My mother was looking at the Stegosaurus drawing. My mother had not moved since the pawn shop sentence. Rosa looked back at me. "Mijo, how much have you found out?" $12,040. 14 withdrawals. Mateo's college fund. "Tell me what I don't know yet." She nodded the way she always nodded, slow, once, like a woman agreeing to her own funeral. Then she set both her hands on the edge of the table and started talking. The story she told me that morning was the story I had been living inside for 25 years without ever being told. She said it had started the year after my father died. She said my mother had asked her for a loan, $3,000 to cover what my mother called a tax problem. Rosa had given it to her without asking questions because we were familia and because that was what you did, and 6 months later my mother had paid her back in 9 separate increments of different sizes, and at the time Rosa had thought nothing of it. People paid back debts the way they could. Then, about a year after that, my mother had asked again, $2,000 this time, a medical bill. Rosa had given her that too. That one had been paid back in 14 increments over a year and a half. "I started counting," Rosa said. "Not because I suspected anything. I just started counting because I have a head for numbers, and the increments started looking like casino payouts. You know how they look. A little bit after a win, nothing for weeks, a little bit after the next one. I started counting because I was a fool who thought counting would answer a question I already knew the answer to." She looked at my mother again. My mother still did not look up. I asked her once, only once, 8 years ago. I asked her if she had a problem with the machines. She told me no. She looked me in the eye and told me no, and I let her lie to me because she was my sister and because she had raised her boy alone and because some lies you can let a woman tell you when she has earned them. Rosa's voice cracked on the word lies, and she cleared her throat, and she did not apologize. 4 years ago, she said, my husband died. You remember? I took a lump sum out of the life insurance and I put it in the little savings account at Belco. That was the money I was going to use to go back to Chihuahua for the first time since my mother's funeral. I told your mother about it. I told her the account number. I am old, Daniel. I am old and trusting, and I told my sister the account number because I wanted her to come with me to Chihuahua when the time came. My stomach turned. She took $2,600 out of it, Rosa said, in increments, over 4 months. She paid most of it back before I noticed. Not all of it. I noticed anyway. I noticed the week after I noticed, if you know what I mean. I noticed by the way she stopped looking me in the eye when I asked about the Chihuahua trip. And then I checked my account, and I saw it. And I sat in my living room and I cried for about an hour, and then I called her and I did not tell her I had seen it. I told her I had changed the passwords, only that. She understood. She never borrowed from me again. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were burying your wife, Rosa said, and because your son needed his grandmother, and because I did not want to be the woman who took that from him, and because I believed, Daniel, I believed that she had stopped. She turned her head and looked at my mother, and my mother finally raised her eyes. You didn't stop, Rosa said. It was not a question. My mother did not answer. There's one more thing, Rosa said to me. She turned back. And I don't know if now is the time, but there is never going to be a better time, and if I don't say it today I am going to carry it into my grave and your mother is going to let me, and I am not going to let her. Say it. Your 8th grade class trip. Washington, D.C., 2001. You remember it? I nodded. It was one of my best childhood memories. 5 days in a coach bus hotel in Arlington, a rainy afternoon at the Vietnam Memorial, a teacher who let us run up the Capitol steps, and my mother telling me the night I got home that she had saved for it for 18 months because she wanted me to see the country my father had loved. She had written me a card for the trip. She had tucked $20 into the card and told me to buy something for myself at the gift shop. I had bought a paperweight shaped like the Lincoln Memorial. I still had it on my desk at work. I paid for that trip, Rosa said. Quiet. Certain, most of it. Your mother came to me 3 weeks before and told me there had been a mistake with the electric bill and she had lost that month's budget. Those were her words. A mistake with the electric bill. I gave her the money the same day. $1,500. The card with your $20 in it was mine too. The paperweight was mine. The whole trip was mine. The kitchen got very quiet. I looked at my mother. My mother finally looked at me. She said, "Me, Ray. Don't." I stood up. I have spent my whole life standing up carefully out of chairs. Measured. Controlled. A man who works on ladders learns how to move his body through space without making a sound. That was not how I stood up from my mother's kitchen table on that Tuesday morning. I did not break anything. I did not raise my voice. I pushed the chair back with the backs of my knees, and I set the Stegosaurus drawing face up in front of my mother, and I told her, in the calmest voice I could find, 3 things. You're going to pay back what you can. I don't want your house. I am not taking anything else from you, because I have already taken everything from you I am ever going to take. You are not going to be at Mateo's birthday party, and you are not going to tell him any of this yourself. I am his father. I will decide what he hears. She was crying. Silent crying, the kind she had done the week Sarah died. The kind that moved through her like water moving through a rock. You're not going to see him for a while, I said. I don't know how long. I don't know what a while is. I am going to tell you when that changes. Do you understand me, Mama? She nodded. Say it. See me, Ray. I understand. I turned to Rosa. I said, I love you, Tia. I need to leave. Rosa stood up. She followed me to the front door. On the porch, she put a hand on my arm and stopped me. The wind was still moving through the juniper. The morning was getting warmer. I could hear a lawnmower 2 blocks over, the most ordinary sound in the world. Daniel, your mother loves that boy. I need you to know that. That's the cruelest part of this, mijo. That is the cruelest part. I said, I know, Tia. I got in the truck. I backed out of her driveway. I drove to the end of Salida Street and turned right, and then I turned right again, and then I pulled over onto the shoulder of a frontage road I did not recognize and put the truck in park and put my forehead on the top of the steering wheel. I took out my phone. Kev picked up on the second ring. He was in bed. It was not 2 in the morning the way I would remember it later. It was 10:51 on a Tuesday, but it felt like 2 in the morning. It felt like the middle of the longest night of my life. And when he said my name, once, like a question, I opened my mouth to tell him what had happened and nothing came out. I could not say the words. I could not make my throat make a word. And then I cried for the first time since my wife died. Kev did not try to talk me down. He did not say anything smart. He said, come over. I'll leave the door unlocked. I'm making eggs. I drove to his apartment on the north edge of town, parked between a Tacoma and a minivan, and sat in the hallway of his building for a full minute because I could not remember which side of the hallway his unit was on. He came out and got me. Kev's apartment was the same as it had been since the divorce, a sectional the color of a paper bag. A framed photograph of the job site where we had first worked together, the 2 of us in our 20s, grinning like men who had no idea how many things were coming. A kitchen that smelled like onions and cast iron. He made me eat. I don't remember the eggs. I remember that I was holding the fork in my left hand, which is not the hand I hold a fork in, and he did not correct me, and when I was done he took the plate away and put a blanket on me and said, sleep, you're not driving home tonight. I slept for 4 hours on his sectional with my boots still on. When I woke up it was the middle of the afternoon. Kev was on his balcony talking to somebody on the phone in a voice I had not heard him use in years. Quiet, careful, the voice he used to use with his ex-wife when she was having a panic attack. He was talking about me. I could tell by the way his back was shaped. He came inside. He sat down next to me on the couch. He said, tell me when you're ready. I told him. I told him all of it. The envelope, the 14 numbers, the Stegosaurus drawing, the drive, the wedding ring, Rosa, the Washington trip, the thing about the flour and the bake, the casserole dish on the counter, the pawn shop on Colfax. Every single thing that had come out of my mother's mouth at the table in the kitchen where I had done my algebra. Kev did not interrupt me. He did not say Jesus or no way or any of the things people say when they don't know what to say. He let me finish. Then he put a hand on my shoulder, a foreman's hand, weighted and exact, and he said, Dan, you need to go home and tell your boy. I said, I don't know how. He said, neither did I. The time I had to tell mine, you figure it out by starting. I drove home in the slow part of the afternoon when the light in Denver does the thing where it turns the mountains pink and the city into cardboard. Mateo was at aftercare. I had 40 minutes before the pickup. I stepped into my own kitchen. The Stegosaurus drawing was still on the table, 14 pencil numbers on the back. I took a clean sheet of paper and I rewrote the numbers from memory because I did not want to hand my son the paper with the pencil numbers on it, and I folded the new sheet and put it in the drawer next to the silverware. Then I took the Stegosaurus drawing and I held it in my hands for a long time. Then I taped it to the refrigerator, face up, the way a father tapes his son's good drawings to the refrigerator, because the drawing was my boy's drawing and he deserved to see it every morning for the rest of his childhood. I picked him up at aftercare at 3:40. He got in the truck. He put his hand on my knee the way he always did. He said, Dad, can we get burritos for dinner? I said, yes. We got burritos. We ate them on the porch. The sun was going down. He asked me about the Stegosaurus cake. He asked me if his abuela was bringing her arroz con leche to the party like she had last year. I said, Mijo, I need to tell you something. He stopped chewing. I had been rehearsing sentences for 4 hours. I had written them in my head in the shower at Kev's apartment and rewritten them in the truck on the way home, and every version I wrote had been wrong, and every version I wrote had been too much, and every version I wrote had been too little, and in the end what I said to him was this. Abuela made a bad mistake with some money that belonged to you. Some money that Mom and I had saved for when you go to college. She spent it, mijo. She shouldn't have. We're going to be okay. I'm going to save it again. You don't have to worry about that. But your abuela is not going to be at your birthday party. And she is not going to come over for a while. I'm not sure how long. I need you to trust me that I'm doing the right thing for us, even when it looks hard. He was quiet for a minute. His eyes were the same eyes as his mother's eyes, which is the unkindest trick grief ever played on me. He looked at the foil on his burrito. He said, in the smallest voice, is abuela sick? And I understood, in that second, that my son had been watching my mother slip for longer than I had. An 8-year-old notices the things a grown man refuses to. I said, something like that, mijo, something like that. He nodded. He put his hand back on my knee. He said, okay, Dad. That was all. That was the whole conversation. 8-year-olds take the truth you give them, and they go somewhere inside themselves, and they come back with a kind of wisdom that will break your chest if you are not careful. 4 days later, we had the birthday party. Kev came. Rosa came. 2 kids from Mateo's 2nd grade class and their tired parents came. Mateo had a Stegosaurus cake, and it was green and gray and had a little white frosting flower in its mouth because I had asked the bakery for one, and Rosa brought her green chile casserole, and nobody mentioned the 3rd place at the table that did not get set. Rosa handed Mateo a Stegosaurus plush the size of a small dog, and Mateo said, very seriously, thank you, Tia Rosa, this is the best one. He carried it for the rest of the afternoon. He set it next to him on the porch when he opened his cards. He took it to bed that night. The birthday happened. The world kept going. 6 weeks later, I opened a new college fund in my own name. I am the only custodian. There is no secondary. I put $120 in it the first week and $80 the second week, and I have not missed a Friday since. It is a small fund. It will be a small fund for a long time. I will rebuild it the way I rebuild everything, which is slowly, one measurement at a time. Kev matches what I put in. He does it through a payroll trick I did not discover for 3 months. When I finally noticed and called him on it, he said, shut up, Dan. He's my godson. Don't make it weird. I have not brought it up again. My mother has started going to a program. Rosa takes her to the meetings on Tuesday nights. She called me once, 2 weeks after the birthday, to tell me she had made it 14 days without a machine. I listened. I did not say much. At the end of the call I said, Mama, I hope you get well. I meant it. I also did not say that I would see her. I have not seen her since I walked out of her kitchen. In late May, on a Sunday morning when Mateo was at Rosa's, I drove to the cemetery on the south end of town and I sat on the grass in front of Sarah's stone. I told her the number in the new fund. It was not a good number. That didn't matter. The 14 withdrawals came next, and the pawn shop, and the ring, and the casserole, and the fork in my left hand on Kev's couch. Then the flower in the Stegosaurus's mouth. Then the way Mateo's eyes had gone when he asked if his abuela was sick. Then the part that was hardest, that I had not kept the promise she had asked me to keep, the one about the fund, but I had kept the other one, the one she did not make me say out loud, the one about our boy. I sat on her grass for a long time. I did not cry. I was done crying, for the week at least. Weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon, Mateo was lying on the living room rug with his Stegosaurus plush, drawing another dinosaur. He looked up at me and said, Dad, why doesn't abuela come over anymore? I had been waiting for the question. I had been rehearsing the answer for 6 weeks. I still did not have it right. but I had the closest thing to right that an 8-year-old could carry. I said, because grown-ups sometimes hurt the people they love the most, and then they have to sit with it for a long time before they know what to say. Mateo thought about that. His forehead did the thing his mother's forehead used to do when she was working out a math problem. Then he put his hand on my knee. And he did not move it for the rest of the afternoon.